Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about the Southwest scam. The Financial Institution Recovery and Enforcement Act, FIREA, of the massive banking and savings and loan swindle and collapse of the 1980s. Now, folks, it's a good idea to have a good understanding of what conspiracy means. The conspiracy to conduct the cover-up and the whitewash known as the Southwest scam. Now, folks, I want to get you to understand that sometimes you got to put a little accelerant on the fire and get things cooking. So, before we get down to the explanation of how they bleached it and how they scrubbed it for all the truth and covered everything up, I want you to understand that the massive mortgage fraud, the massive securities fraud, the securitization frauds, the massive fake documents, and all this other dirt dealing and flipping and daisy chaining, old Richard Bowen there, David Dayen, and Matt Taibbi and Professor William Black, they'll understand the daisy chain of loans. How this entire mess has been perpetrated by the men and women that own and operate the Green Curtain. They are the Wizards of Oz. Folks, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were declared insolvent many years ago and collapsed. And they were taken over by the United States Government Incorporated. The United States Government Incorporated are the VA, the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, and all the mortgage lending institutions, also known as the Federal Reserve member banks. These institutions all pay into, report to, and conspire with, remember conspiracy here, the common definition of conspiracy is act together knowingly. The conspiracy known as the U.S. Treasury and their shin plasters. Now, when I describe for people the smoke and mirrors that are being employed in this giant robbery of the entire nation, the whole republic has been robbed beyond belief. You need to understand that it goes way, 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 way farther than the FBI's little dirty, rotten games involving this Russian distraction of Comey and Mueller. And the other players with Crapper and Clapper and, Donner and Blitzen, the entire cast of the Subvert America Incorporated. Subvert America Incorporated. It's keeping the American people distracted while they walk off with trillions. The United States Army, missing trillions. The Department of Defense can't account for trillions. The Treasury cannot account for trillions. And, of course, the Pentagon and Central Intelligence Agency cannot account for trillions of shin plasters. Fiat, Federal Reserve, bills of credit, scrip, S-C-R-I-P, scrip, the fiat coin of the realm. It's all fluff and stuff, ladies and gentlemen. So When you're watching this dog and pony show about the Russians hacking our elections and the Russians rigging our elections, I want you to remember that the magical, fantastical, vanishing trillions are how they finance the whole show. It's not the Russians, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Democrats and it's the Republicans. It's the Democrats and it's the Republicans. This is who rig elections. Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., Dick Cheney, Mr. Potato Head. That's Dan Quayle for you neophytes. This entire orchestra of fraud, this entire symphony of chicanery is all financed with shin plaster from the Federal Reserve, which is a bunch of private gangsters that swap and trade in shin plaster. I hope that some of this is sinking in. Now, you've got this fraud closure, mortgage securitization, dirt dealing, land scheming, and scam and flipping, the dirt dealing and flipping, the felonious colonius. Now, I've got a friend down in Texas. His name is Judge Barb Sadler. Old Judge Sadler. He'll quickly understand what the colonius, red flag, unrecorded land developments are. They're all the same thing. Wildcat, phantom ghost, paper, let's not forget the paper, land schemes. The fraudulent, deceptive, magical, fantastical, less than lawful land speculation game, also known as the unregulated real estate markets. The United States Congress held hearings back in the 1960s about the unregulated real estate markets, the red flag subdivisions, and that's to Judge Alan Barb Sadler of Montgomery County, Texas. Now I'm going to shift gears here just a little bit, and we're going to address the massive, unbelievable, where'd it go? There it is. The Southwest scam. Now people are kind of scratching their heads and they're asking, what does he mean by the Southwest plan? Well, the Southwest plan, the scam, was to cover up all the massive savings and loans and banking fraud in the 1980s in the southwestern United States. It was called the Southwest Plan. What we did there is we decided to forcibly and untruthfully declare a whole bunch of banks and savings and loans insolvent that were not really insolvent. And the reason we did that is to make sure that all of the lawsuits that had been filed against these banks and savings and loans could not go to trial. Like the trial that was canceled that I filed and obtained a trial date for against the Western Banks of Houston. Hello, Nelda Luce, Radabow Blair, and Herd Goggin, Blair and Williams. Old Nelda Luce, she'll get this one right away, right, Judge Sadler? They decided that the Western banks were insolvent. They didn't tell everybody that they were owned by multi-billionaires. The Western Bank was owned and operated by multi-billionaires who are today known as the Purple Capital Group. Purple Capital out of Dubai, Purple Capital out of Lebanon, Purple Capital out of Monaco on the French Riviera, Purple Capital out of London, and Purple Capital out of Zurich, and Purple Capital out of Zug, Switzerland. The Rita Laba Betty Group. and Chase National Bank. Chase National Bank and KPMG Financial and Carlyle Group. How about that, George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton? Isn't this a fantastical conversation? Cat Wolford, Bank Liquidation Specialist, FDIC. That Cat Wolford. And of course she went on to create the Green Zone Bank in Iraq there, Baghdad, excuse me. That Cat Wolford, who's consulting with the IMF and the World Bank. That Cat Wolford. And if you have any doubts with all of this, just get a hold of, Matt Taibbi at Rolling Stone and the Associated Press. And then you can get a hold of Peter Bruton of the Mafia, the CIA, and George Bush, operating out of Houston, Texas, where, of course, they were operating Iran-Contra and Charlie Wilson's war. Isn't this a fascinating story? George Bush and Bill Clinton. The Clinton-Bush League. The Clinton-Bush Initiatives. The Clinton-Bush Foundation. And the Clinton-Bush, we destroyed all of the emails. We destroyed all of the servers with the hammers. And of course they used the bleach bit to get rid of all those emails. Hillary Rodham Clinton. Folks, when you take a real hard, long look, when you start taking a hard, long look at the congressional hearings into regulating the unregulated real estate market, which took place in the 1960s, 67, 68, somewhere in there, maybe 1966. And you start examining the writings of Paul Friggins. He wrote quite a few stories for the Reader's Digest. And then when you begin to examine what Don Bowles of the Arizona Project was writing about in the 60s and the 1970s. And then you jump a little bit forward and you look at this giant massive collapse that brought about FIREA. FIREA and the Southwest scam. You quickly begin to see that the materials that are put forth to the world in the Great Texas Bank Job and the toxic zombie developments and America Looted and Looted Nation. And then, of course, you can bring in Linda Minor and Catherine Austin Fitts with Show Me the Money. Where's the Money? Where is the Money by Catherine Austin Fitts. She was the director of the Housing and Urban Development Department. She was an associate director of Housing and Urban Development, and she was a director of the FHA. Catherine Austin Fitts. Where's the money? Show me the money, right, Kathy Fitts? And Linda Minor. Linda Minor was a assistant Harris County, that's Houston, Texas. Linda Minor was an assistant Harris County attorney, working right there in the heart of the FIREA country, the Southwest scam. Now you can bring in some experts like, get a hold of Professor William Black. Hey, Bill. And you can get a hold of, the Attorney General of the United States, Mr. Jeff Sessions, and the Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Mr. Christopher Wray, and ask them all about those Southwest United States savings and loans and banks that were doing the Clinton land flipping, the Clinton dirt dealing, and the Clinton scheming and scamming in real estate frauds all over the western United States. California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Utah, Oregon, Washington State, Montana, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's just full of this real estate scheming and scamming. And then, of course, you got all the minerals and the oil and gas schemes and scams. You know, what comes out of the real estate, all this oil and gas and minerals racketeering in the Southwest. It's all over the world, folks. Goes from Iceland to England to Spain to Japan, Switzerland, all over the world. Germany, Ireland, Hawaii. It's all, I almost forgot Australia. Australia is just absolutely swimming and bankster gangster real estate scheming and scamming with their central banks. The central banks and their internal revenue treasury departments of all these nations with the postal system are all deeply involved in all of it. Pam Ragland, Renee Powers, K. Tuckness, let's not forget the private investigator, K.C. Tuckness from the hoodlands of Texas, down there at Conroe, Texas. Right back into your country, Judge Barb Sadler. And I want to give a shout out to my friend in Houston, Senior Federal District Judge Lynn Hughes. This is quite the octopus Judge Hughes. And Judge Lee Rosenthal, she come out of Baker and Botts. Isn't that coincidental? I think Speed Elder of Sewell and Riggs and Lee Rosenthal will understand what I'm talking about when I mention Purple Capital and Rita Labavetti Group and the Westgate Investments of Zurich, Zug, London, Dubai, Monaco, and Lebanon. Oh, and Kenya. Can you imagine that? Yep. Infra Motors, Kenya, Africa. So Barry Soweto there, Barack Obama. Ain't that interesting? The old Infra Motors and the CIA in Kenya. This is an interesting conversation, isn't it? Barack Obama. Which I'm going to end this one up on the magical, fantastical 11,000 times how many? 11,000 secreted financial documents. I remember when Hillary said she only had one device, and then of course Bill Clinton said, I did not have sexual relationships with the Arkansas Industrial Development Bank. And I did not screw the Madison Guarantee Savings and Loan. And we never did any narcotics and weapons trafficking out of Mena, Arkansas. Remember that one, Bill? That one's pretty good. And okay, Jeffrey Epstein's Island and Pizzagate and everything else, right, Bill? Bill Clinton and the George Bushes doing the old Southwest. Oh, wait a minute. Subverted America. Wait a second. Where'd my. Oh, here it is. Here it is. The Southwest scam. Isn't this correct? Shrub. George Bush Jr.